Before I worked for Corman, I was a fan of his films. I saw them all when I was growing up, and became quite a fan. In college, I had Roger Corman buttons made up. Everybody else was wearing Godard buttons, and I figured Roger had made at least as many movies as Godard, so I had my Godard button, my Corman button made up, and I sent one to Roger, and he wrote me a little letter back saying what good taste I had, and so this was my first connection with the guy that I would eventually go out to Hollywood and work for, cutting trailers. My first meeting with Roger was a little offbeat because I was supposed to show him my trailer for Caged Heat, which I had just put together. And it was my first trailer, and it was a mess. It was terrible. And I was late for the screening for reasons I won't go into, and the first thing Roger said to me was, "If I were you, young man, I'd get to these things on time." And I figured, this is it. Then I showed him my trailer, which was a mess, and I figured, this is it. But no, he was very helpful. He told me what I should do, what I shouldn't do. I went back, I recut the trailer. The picture ended up coming out and making a lot of money, and therefore I was hired as the trailer editor. To do a trailer, you have to take a movie and take a scene and cut it down to its essentials, and maybe only 3 shots where there are 7 shots in the scene. And you figure out, well, you didn't need this shot, and you didn't need this shot, and you can cut from this to this. So later, when you actually get a chance to direct, you have a head up on everybody else because you already know what you don't need. And so after doing my first picture, Hollywood Boulevard, which I co-directed with Alan Arkush, our fellow trailer editor, 2 other projects came up. One was Rock and Roll High School, and the other one was Piranha. And I thought Rock and Roll High School was actually a much better idea than Piranha, because Piranha was a Jaws ripoff, and Jaws had come out 3-4 years earlier. But Alan was really passionate about Rock and Roll High School, so he ended up doing that, and I got the fish story. So Piranha was not a very good script that was brought to Roger from an outside source, and he felt that it needed to be punched up, and his story editor, Francis Dole, knew of a writer named John Sayles, who had recently written a book called Pride of the Bimbos that was getting good reviews. And so John Sayles was hired to rewrite the not very good script of Piranha, which was great for me because John was a New Jersey boy just like I. And we hit it off. We were of the same political bent. And I wanted to turn it more into a science fiction film as opposed to a Nature Gone Wild film. And he, of course, was interested in adding some political heft to it. And so we ended up making a sort of spoof of Jaws, although it plays kind of straight, but it is obviously a movie that knows that it's a parody of Jaws. Well, as Roger often said to us, if you make 2 good pictures for me in a row, you'll never have to work for me again. But that doesn't mean that those who went through what we call the Corman School, during which we would grouse constantly about how cheap the pictures were and how we weren't getting any support. After we got away from Roger and realized how complicated it is to work for studios, we started looking back with nostalgia at the Corman experience, where basically he would leave you alone, provided you gave him the correct exploitation elements. And so you'll find that most people who went through that experience became very fond of Roger. And so over the years, a lot of us have used him as an actor in our pictures, and very few of us have actually gone back and actually made another film for Roger, but Peter Bogdanovich did. When Peter did Targets, he became very well known, and he had a big career. And when he was at a slightly low ebb, he went back and worked for Roger, made another good picture, St. Jack, and he got out of that rut. So Roger was always there. It was like a place to fall back on. Roger's been accused of exploiting us, but we were exploiting him because no one else would hire us except him, and none of us knew anything. So Roger was getting some bargain rate work, but he also had an unerring eye for picking people who really, really wanted to make movies and would work extra hard to try to make the best version of whatever biker or women in cages movie that they were doing. And the majority of those people went on to big careers. In the first script that we got, the writer couldn't figure out how to get people into the water once the piranhas were discovered, and so he invented a bear to chase people into the water. And then after that didn't work, he invented a forest fire that would chase the bear that chased the people into the water. And so there really wasn't anywhere to go with that script. So John and I came up with a completely different set of characters and basically a different plot involving a Vietnam-era experiment to unleash piranha in the rivers of North Vietnam. We did get some help from the military in Texas when we were shooting by giving them a fake script in which the military does not turn out to be the bad guys. Because in our script, the military is in league with, they want this, they want these piranhas, and they're up to no good, basically. And so we sent them a script where the military was the heroes, and they let us use these jeeps and trucks and officers and stuff, and we got a lot of stuff for practically nothing. And the odd thing is that they never checked later to see the movie, to see that that wasn't the movie that they thought we were making. Roger was always interested in adding some sort of political relevance to the movies, no matter how silly the plots. So they were always slightly left-wing, and they were always sort of messagey. Never in a way that got in the way of the story, but it was always there if you looked for it. There was no stop motion in the original script, but Phil Tippett was a friend of mine, and we, the producer John Davison and I, really loved stop motion, and we figured we wanted to find a way to get it into the picture. So in the Mad Doctor's laboratory, we decided that we would have a creature, undetermined of exactly what it was or how, that was wandering around in the lab. And unfortunately, this was a decision we made after we had shot some stuff with the actors. So by the time we had the looping and Bradford Dillman saw the monster in the laboratory, he was completely bewildered. He had no idea why this was in the movie. And I said, it's because we're telling the audience that that's what kind of movie this is, that this is a movie for people who like those kind of pictures. It's not a Nature Gone Wild movie. It's not a crazed bear tears up tourists movie. It's a science fiction movie. And this alerts them. Now, we would have loved to, at the end of the picture, had the monster come back 50 feet tall and, terrorize Santa Monica Pier, but we couldn't afford that. Then we thought it might be cheaper to have the monster running across the road and get run over by the car during the chase at the end. But basically, we just were satisfied in having him in the picture at all. Young people don't have an opportunity to see stop motion anymore, so they don't really know what it is. And, of course, the new techniques are much different. But stop motion really came on the map, in silent days with Willis O'Brien. And then when King Kong was made, I mean, that was the ultimate stop motion. Try to imagine what the impact of King Kong was in 1933 when people had never seen anything like that before. I mean, it was truly movie magic. And when Ray Harryhausen picked up the torch in the 40s and 50s, those movies were incredibly spectacular to us kids because, again, we had never seen monsters move that way. And it was all because this one guy was taking hours and hours and hours and hours to move all these things incrementally and infuse them with his personality. Then we went into the CGI world where it takes 20 guys to do what one guy did. And, of course, it's smooth and it's, technically proficient and all that. But it doesn't quite have the impact or the heart, I don't think, of stop motion.
Hey, you cool your jets, lady. I didn't axe murder your young couple. I can't help you. I haven't seen them.
Originally, the idea was to have Peter Fonda be the star of the movie, but Peter was he'd been burned too many times, and he said he wasn't going to do the movie unless the special effects were going to be good. And it took us so long to figure out how to do the special effects that he went off and took another job. And we ended up with Bradford Dillman, who had a very high TV queue. All the actors in the film were well-known television names because in those days one of the prerequisites for making a picture of that budget was that you would make money when you sold it to network television. But you couldn't sell it to network television without certain names that were okayed by the TVQ list, which says audiences know who this is. So we didn't make it with Peter Fonda, but it would have been fine with Peter, I guess.
And where we go from here, Dr. Mengers? Well, I'm personally going to head a full-scale investigation into this incident, both to discover who is responsible to make absolutely certain that nothing like this could possibly happen again.
Barbara Steele was a favorite of mine ever since I had seen Black Sunday and, of course, 8½. And when John wrote his script, there was a part of a scientist. He was a male scientist. And I said, why don't we make her a female scientist and we can hire Barbara Steele? And we did.
There's nothing left to fear.
The only problem I had with Barbara was that she had her little kid with her. And sometimes, because we were shooting in an amusement park, I would look in the scenes and I would see Barbara and her kid walking by in the background. And I'd say, Barbara, get out of there. Otherwise, it was fine.
What was it all for?
To destroy the river systems of the North Vietnamese. Our goal was to develop a strain of this killer fish that could survive in cold water and then breed at an accelerated rate. We had everything. Blank check. And then the war ended.
This is the first time I worked with Kevin McCarthy, who replaced an actor named Eric Braeden, who was originally going to play that part. But after he saw our setup at the Olympic swimming pool and how amateur look it was, he called up and he said, I can't do this. So we offered it to Kevin, and I remember his agent saying that he was walking around Central Park thinking over whether or not he wanted to do the movie. And he said yes, and I met him on the picture, and he was very method. He had a very actor method. And his first scene was a big fight he has with Bradford Dillman, and I thought he was going to kill him. I thought he was going to kill Bradford Dillman. I mean, he was just so into it. He was very intense. But we got along very well, and then I used him in The Howling and a couple of other movies, and we got to be friends, and then he just sort of became a staple in my movies.
Eric Braeden, is there still some footage of him in there, in the underwater scene?
Eric Braeden is the underwater shots of the doctor swimming.
It's German, by the way. His real name is...
Oh, Hans Gudegast. I know.
Oh. Got the river. Wakes me up in the morning. Gives me a bath. Does my laundry. Gives me my dinner. Puts me to sleep real gentle. I got my river. Got brandy. Paul? What do you got up here?
Well, we first went after John Carradine for the Keenan Wynn part, but he didn't have a high enough TVQ. So we got Keenan Wynn, which was fine, because I worked with John later in the next picture, and Keenan Wynn was a hoot. He was completely deaf from riding motorcycles, but he was a great guy. And this is my first movie by myself, and I was concerned that it wasn't going to be good. I wasn't used to directing, and so I didn't know how much of what you want to get that you normally don't get. And so I felt that I had an editor, Mark Goldblatt, who was editing while I was shooting. But then when I came back, I took it over myself, and I was determined to make the picture better by moving around the scenes and taking events and changing the order of the events as written. And also cutting the piranha attacks, which was very complicated because the number of frames that you could see the piranhas gave it a very impressionistic kind of a style, and it made the puppets look better. But after a while, when you've been doing this over and over, you really don't know what's better. You don't know what looks better because you've been doing it for so long. And I was kind of exhausted, and people would actually come and into the editing room to see me, and then later they'd say, I came to visit you, but you didn't look up. And it was like I was so monomaniacally devoted to the TV, to the screen of the movieola that I didn't even notice anybody was there. I slept in the editing room. I didn't go to my wrap party. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was just totally obsessed with this movie. And apparently it worked out okay, because when the picture came out, it made money in America, but it made a lot of money in South America and a lot of money in Europe. In previous Piranha movies, they had sort of cheated a little bit. I mean, in Pirates of Blood River and pictures like that, they would basically be on the surface and they would shoot BBs and stuff, and you imagine that they were piranhas. There was very little actual footage of piranhas available. There was a famous bit of a piranha eating a cow, or piranhas eating a cow, that had been run on nature programs. But for the most part, there really wasn't that much material. And there were some other Piranha movies, but again, they didn't really focus on the Piranhas. Our Piranhas had to carry the movie, and so there was a tremendous amount of R&D that we did of shooting. We shot almost all the effects scenes before we shot the rest of the picture, and Roger wouldn't actually give it a green light until he approved the special effects. We had a whole group of effects guys, many of whom had just come off Star Wars, and were making their names in Hollywood. I can't remember. The name Doug Beswick comes to mind, but I can't remember exactly who designed the actual Piranhas. But they were pretty well done, and when you put them on the end of a stick with a little lever, you could make the mouths move, and that's why the frame rate was so important. And when they would chomp into prosthetic legs and prosthetic bodies, and little pieces of the bodies would come out along with the Caro syrup. It was moderately disgusting. It was actually pretty much what we wanted. When it was suggested to me that Pino Donaggio might want to do the score for Piranha, I was flabbergasted. I couldn't imagine that the guy who did Don't Look Now was going to want to work on our low-budget fish movie. But I think at that time Pino was looking for an entree into Hollywood, and in doing low-budget films was one way of doing it. Also, it was quite economical because he would do all the work in Italy and then send us the material, and you didn't have any musician rights to pay or anything like that. And so we got a very, very good score for not very much money. The only downside is I couldn't be there when he recorded it, so I had to take whatever his interpretation was. And later, when I worked with Jerry Goldsmith, I was always there, and if something didn't go exactly the way I wanted, I could go up and consult with him, and we could change it. But with Pino, it was you took what you got, and luckily, it was good stuff. And the movie was surprisingly successful, and it put me on the aquatic map, and I was offered Jaws 3 People 0, which I almost made. Then I was offered Orca 2, Barracuda, some picture about a giant turtle, alligator, any kind of loathsome water creature. That was me.
You want a phone?
The piranhas.
I thought you're not even going to say that word.
But the piranhas.
What about the goddamn piranhas?
They're eating the guests, sir.
The Piranhas. What about the Piranhas? They're eating the guests.